My name is Joe Proni, and this is the Rise Above Project. And today I want to talk about a question that I get asked all the time. What it is what is the most important skill that you need to have in order to have a great relationship? Now, the answer might surprise you. Typically, people are going to think about conflict resolution skills, communication skills. It's going to have something to do with finances or some type of sexual matter or something like that. But I don't believe it is. I think the most important skill in order to try to have the best shot at having a good long-term relationship is to be able to choose wisely. Now, look at a sports analogy, for example. Let's say we're looking at a football team. You could have a great owner, you could have great coaches, you could have all of this. But if you choose a quarterback, for example, that doesn't pan out, that doesn't have the qualities that's needed to be an NFL quarterback, I don't care what kind of coaches you have, you're not going to do well. So it really starts from who you choose. Now, how do you choose correctly? I think that's where the major issue should be right from the beginning. I had this conversation so many times I can't even mention, but people are like, well, how do you do that? If you had to name one thing in order to maybe help somebody to have a better life as they get older, what would it be? And again, this is what I would talk about. How do you choose a better partner? How do you be a better partner? Well, I would say you have to improve your vision. And this is what I mean by this. It's the same thing as saying you need to have more consciousness. Because when we do this, not only can we choose a better partner, but we'll be a better partner. Thus, the chances of having a better relationship down the road will be that much better. When we have 20/20 vision, we should be able to see our partners for exactly who they are, and without these rose-colored glasses, so to speak. So if we're looking at a partner who is abusive, maybe they're addicted to things, maybe they're suicidal, maybe they're just not that ambitious. Maybe we look at them and we go, well, there's a lot of hormones here, but can I speak to them in 20 years? Are we going to have anything in common? These are important things to know. Because what I see a lot of times, people make excuses for their partners, right? They'll be addicted to something and they'll say, well, it's okay, they had a tough childhood, I'll help him or her get through their addictions. Or if they're abusive, they'll say, well, I can help them get through that. You know, their father or the mother used to hit them when they were young, so maybe, I could help them with that. Or someone, say, has a lot of suicidal ideations, maybe they have tried suicide. And they're like, well, who would run away from a person like that? You have to stand up for them. You can't abandon them at that situation. And I can understand that. There's a lot of really good people out there, and we are wired for connection, and we typically don't want to run away from people who are in need. And this happens in relationships all the time. But if we were really looking at it with 20/20 vision, we can see a person who is suicidal and say, well, is that person who's suicidal, are they really a good candidate to be emotionally available for another human being? Does that make sense? Or if a person can't handle life without inebriating themselves, getting drunk, getting wasted on a regular basis, is that a good candidate to be a good father or mother down the road? If somebody's abusive, are they a good candidate for a long-term relationship? Now, I know even the worst of us have really good qualities, and that makes sense. But if we're looking with 20/20 vision, we have to not justify bad behaviors and things that might be characterological. In other words, things that really probably are not going to change unless the other person really puts a lot of effort into changing it. So that's the first part. 20/20 vision. on looking at our partners for who they really are. The other part that is just as important, actually probably even more important, is to have an X-ray vision or like an MRI type of vision about yourself. Are you aware of your traumas and how they affect your judgments, your behaviors, and your feelings in the present time? Because if you're not, there's going to be a lot of minefields that are going to affect the way you choose partners and also the way you come across as a partner to another person. Have you resolved your issues? Do you even know what your issues are? Are you conscious of them? Let's take a look at it like this. I'll give you another analogy. Let's say you want to eat a good, healthy, nutritious diet, and you're going to go to the grocery store, and you're starving. The chances of you only getting good, healthy food goes down, right? You're not going to choose good foods because you are in need. You are hungry. You're starving. So most likely you're going to get grabby type foods that you can eat real quick, probably processed, probably with a lot of sugar and fat. And it's not going to be healthy for you. And then once you eat it, you're going to feel guilty, and then it's going to start the cycle again. It's the same thing when we're trying to choose a partner. If you're in need, if you have a lot of emotional needs that are not getting met, you're probably going to look at a lot of potential partners as good partners, but they really may not be the best partners overall. It may be just that you're temporarily weak. So we need to take a look at these. So I have about 13, 14 questions here to help determine if your vision or your consciousness is 20/20, or it might be clouded by other things. So let's start at the top. Are you happy? That's important to know, because in order to have a really good relationship, typically, if you want to have a happy relationship, you want to choose someone who's already happy. That makes sense. But if you're not happy and you're trying to look for somebody else to somehow entertain you and make you happy, it's too much pressure on somebody else. So that's probably not going to work out, and that expectation should not be there. So if you're expecting somebody to make you happy in a relationship, I mean, there's some expectation of that, of course. I mean, you don't expect them to make you sad, that's for sure. But overall, you should be happy. And if you're a happy person, you have much, much better chance of choosing wisely. Same thing as, like I said, when you go into the store, right? You're going to choose wisely if your stomach's already full and your needs are already met. Number 2, are you fulfilled? Again, same thing. You want your meaning and purpose to be based off of who you are and what you're doing, so you feel good about who you are. You don't want your meaning and purpose to be based off of somebody else, saying that you're not somebody unless you're connected to somebody, or you want to put all of your emotional strength into somebody else. Now, I'm not saying that that's terrible all the time. I talk to a lot of people in my life, and you'll hear most of them say that the most important thing in their life are their children, and I totally understand that. That's, I definitely get that. However, the problem becomes is that as your children get older and more mature, they want to have their own lives. They're going to leave you. So if your happiness and your fulfillment is based just on your children, at some point all bills become due and payable, so to speak, and you're going to be really sad and unfulfilled when they leave. So you want your fulfillment to come from yourself, so you can bring that to a relationship, as opposed to getting into a relationship to pull that fulfillment from somebody else. Number 3, do you trust people? Extremely important. If you don't trust people, it's going to be hard to have a good relationship with anybody, because you're always going to feel this sense of being unsafe. And the same thing with the other person. If you bring in the thought that you don't trust people, you're going to make other people feel a little bit insecure as well. Again, that does not give firm ground to a good relationship. Number 4, Do you feel like you have the need to control other people? The same type of thing. If you're in this situation where you feel like you need to control people, there's probably some type of unresolved trauma in you that you're afraid to change at this moment. So you're trying to change the world. And again, it's completely understandable. But again, without that 20/20 vision to know this, and if you don't fix that, it's extremely important to choose the right person or to be the right person in a relationship. Number 5, are you jealous, envious, or insecure in general? Same type of thing. If you don't handle this beforehand, before you get into a relationship, it's going to be extremely hard to have a relationship that's equal and reciprocal, that you both feel safe in. Are you angry? Again, repeating the same type of things. Bringing anger into a relationship is going to be very difficult for both partners. Number 7, do you make too many boundaries or no boundaries at all? Typically when people go through a lot of trauma, they can end up on the margins. In sense of like, the trauma response might be a fight or flight or fawn. When people have a lot of trauma, they might build up a lot of boundaries because they think that it's protecting them. And it kind of is, obviously. But if you have too many boundaries, you become emotionally distant to people. That's not conducive to having a good relationship. On the flip side, some people just try to just say forget it, and they just kind of hold up the white flag and they don't fight at all, meaning that they don't have any boundaries at all. They don't have any expectations for themselves or other people. And so they allow themselves to be walked on all the time. In this sense of having no boundaries, that's also not conducive to having a good relationship. It's actually a pathway to an abusive relationship. Number 8, are you free of negative addictions? Again, I say negative addictions because I do believe there are positive addictions, but that's for another show. Again, if you are addicted to, let's say, drugs or alcohol, it's quite possible that you can't be present for the relationship you're in. So you're not going to be a good partner, number 1. And number 2, if you know someone who's like that, we need to see our partners for who they are. Is that they're not going to be emotionally present with us, and they might cause great damage. For example, if somebody has a gambling addiction or whatever addiction they have, they don't have that problem exclusively. It means that you're adopting that problem and you have to know it. Now, I'm not saying never get involved with anybody that has an addiction. That's your choice. I would never tell somebody what to do. That's not my job. But what I would say is, again, going back to full consciousness and having 20/20 vision, if you want to choose somebody who's an alcoholic or a drug addict or have some type of situation like that, at least know what you're getting into and don't be surprised all the time when there's mayhem in your life, but understand what you're taking on. Are you persistently depressed? Again, if you're a person who tends to be depressed, it's going to be very difficult to choose a partner wisely because you might choose anybody who makes you smile in the current time. Or if you get validated immediately, you're going to feel good. Now, if you do this for over a period of time and you get connected to somebody, you're going to feel like, well, this is something good. It's taking up your time, taking up your space, and it can temporarily make you feel good. Then all of a sudden, now you're connected to somebody emotionally. You might be a really good person, of course. And now you're in this situation where you're in a relationship, let's say, with somebody for 2 years, and you might have a kid already. And then you realize that the only reason why you connected to this person is because you were looking for a way of not being depressed and you were looking for somebody to validate you. Again, if you're depressed all the time, one of the things to do is to have 20/20 vision, to know that you're depressed a lot and to try to figure out a way to not be depressed. Or if you're in depression, to be able to figure out the best way to make decisions for yourself and not choose people and put them into your life that can be harmful down the road. Number 10, are you suicidal? Again, this seems to be self-explanatory. if you're with someone who's suicidal, I'm not telling you to run away, that's your choice, but ask yourself, is this person emotionally available? I don't know anybody who wants to kill themselves. What I do know is that they want the pain to stop. So if they're a type of person that's so self-involved because the world is so hard for them at that time, and I'm not making a judgment, like this happens to a lot of people, I get it. I think suicide is the number 2 killer from people from 10 to 24 years old. This is a big deal. But what I'm saying is, if a person is that tied to their own emotions about having so much emotional pain, my question to you is, if you're going to choose wisely, is that the type of person that you would want in your life to say, yes, that's who I want to spend the rest of my life with? It's just a question. Number 11, are you lonely? Again, obviously, if you're lonely, and a lot of us are these days, through social media and all this stuff, if you're lonely, obviously it's going to cloud your vision of who you choose, and you may not choose wisely when you're lonely. Again, it's like trying to choose good food when you're starving. Typically, your decisions are not going to be of the best caliber. Are you horny? Again, good question. If you have sexual needs and you're alone, you may look to choose partners that are not really of good caliber, or somebody who you would actually want to have a good relationship with down the road. So it's important to know this. Now, I'm not telling you who to be with and who not to be with, but understand who's making the decision here, or what part of you is making the decision. And number 13, are you emotionally dysregulated? It's an important thing to know, because if you're emotionally dysregulated a lot, you might choose a partner to try to in some way regulate you. And on the other hand, if you're looking in on this, if you have a partner who's emotionally dysregulated, you're going to have to be okay with those ups and downs. Again, I'm not telling you not to be with a person like that. Just have the consciousness and the vision to know what you're getting into, and don't justify it and say, well, it's not a big deal. It is something to look at. So let's continue with this with a little bit more detail, because I want to talk about trust issues. People who don't trust people, typically what happens is that they don't end up building trust over time. So if you're with someone who has trust issues, it's like being on a treadmill, right? Like, you can do the work, you can be walking, but yet you're technically not getting anywhere. You're in the same place. And that's what happens with a lot of people who have trust issues, is that you can be in a relationship for a long time, but yet the clock starts back every day from square one every single day. So you're not really investing. And it's hard to build trust with a person who has the general feeling of mistrust that they might have from childhood trauma. So again, we need to have 20/20 vision or x-ray vision. We need to look inside ourselves and ask ourselves, do we have trust issues? Because if we have major trust issues, and it doesn't matter what our partner does, we're still going to have mistrust, it's not going to bode well for choosing a good partner or for actually being a good partner. Let's look at communication issues. Now, the goal in communication is to be assertive, to be able to throw the fastball right down the middle. This is what I need, here's how I feel. And you can say that. Now, if somebody gets offended, that's typically on them, unless you're trying to be mean in some way, which that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about just stating needs and wants. Again, gold standard, be assertive. But most people's communication styles are rooted in some type of trauma. And again, we need to take a look at those. So number one, a very passive style of communication. This happens when people sacrifice their authenticity to keep the attachment. And again, this happens from having, let's say, parents who were alcoholics, parents who are very inconsistent, a lot of complex post-traumatic stress disorder. We see this a lot. They apologize for having needs, they deny themselves, they abandon who they are, they don't say what's on their mind. And it's very difficult to have a relationship with with a person like this. But on the other hand, if this person is the one who communicates in a passive way, it's very difficult for them to be in a relationship too, because they're constantly lying to themselves and denying their needs. So again, they need to be able to choose wisely. And in order to do that, the first thing they need to do is understand that their style of communication is not conducive to having a good relationship. The next communication style would be passive aggressive, where they're emotionally dishonest, and let's just call it what it is, they lie. And they might stay quiet to avoid confrontation. Now, of course, they've done this because of some type of unresolved childhood trauma, where they needed to stay quiet, where they needed to be passive aggressive because there might be some punishment, but they didn't want to totally listen to their parents, right? They wouldn't be supported. But on the other hand, they were trying to still rise above that unmet need. So they would be aggressive in the sense that they would get their need met somewhere else. And again, this is not conducive to having a good long-term relationship. You shouldn't have to be passive aggressive in a good relationship, number one. And number two, you really shouldn't want or expect somebody to be passive aggressive in a relationship either. So it works both sides of the coin. Let's talk about people who are just flat out aggressive. And again, it's a trauma response. We have to resolve this childhood trauma, because if you're in a relationship with somebody and they tend to be controlling, they yell a lot, they blame, they tend to be abusive, it's extremely difficult to be on the other side of that and have a relationship with somebody like that. On the other hand, the person who is yelling and blaming and abusive, they're also going through a lot of pain as well. And again, that's not going to be indicative of a person who feels happy in a relationship when they communicate in that sense. So in that sense, communication is not necessarily the problem, but it's a symptom of deeper problems. So let's take a look at trauma reenactment. This is where people unconsciously seek familiarity, even if it's dysfunctional. And they do this because they have unresolved trauma. So they continue to repeat the same things over and over again in an unconscious way to repair this. Again, we need to know that this exists. We need 20/20 vision, because if you keep choosing the same type of partner over and over again because of unresolved trauma, again, you're not going to be able to choose wisely. Now, listen, a broken clock is right twice a day. You might get lucky. That happens. I've seen it happen. But most likely not. Most likely you're going to have to go in and you're going to have to do the work on yourself to be able to stop choosing people that are science projects for you, that have issues that you're trying to solve in some way. Solve them on yourself first, and then you'll be able to choose partners wisely. Let's talk about attachment styles. Now, the gold standard would be to be secure. You're secure in who you are. You're secure with your partner. Your partner, say, leaves, you can't see them. It doesn't matter. You know that the relationship still exists. You know, we see this with object constancy, whereas like little kids, right, a ball will roll under the couch and they think the ball doesn't exist anymore. And there's a connection or correlation to that, to people who have insecure attachment. If they don't see the person in front of them, they feel like the relationship doesn't exist, and then their anxiety goes way high because they need to see that person, they need to talk to that person, they need to text to that person, because without that connection, they feel like there's no relationship. And it's very, very hurtful for both partners. Again, this trauma has to be resolved in order for a person to move into having a more secure attachment. So anxious attachment types of people, they tend to have an extreme fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, and they need this constant desire for validation. Another attachment style, dismissive. These people are emotionally unavailable. They tend to fear intimacy, and again, they have a lot of mistrust. These types of people have learned that they don't want to get hurt, so they don't really emotionally get involved. However, again, I'll say it, human beings are wired for connection. So if you see a person who is dismissive and emotionally unavailable, that's something that was probably an unconscious way that they chose to stay away from pain, but it's not ideal. So again, this is a very hurtful thing for the person who is dismissive, and it's also very hurtful for the partner who is dealing with a dismissive person. So again, we need to look into this, we need to heal this, and then we can choose better partners. We also have the attachment style of being fearful, where they do have that need for attention and love, like we all do, but they put it out there, like they want the attention and love. However, they also try to avoid true, deep intimacy. I can give you an example of this. So let me do a non-human example, because it just seems so obvious in my life. So in my other room here, I have a feral cat. I'll leave my door open when I work on the computer. And almost every day, he meows and he comes into the room, and it's like he wants attention. Sometimes I'll look and I'll find him, and he'll be like right by my feet. But the first second I look towards him, he runs. Or if I put out my hand, he'll swat me. So it's like this thing where he meows, he walks around, he'll circle around my guitars, like he's here, he wants me to know he's here. He's very vocal, he'll follow me into the bedroom, but if I look at him or even move my hand towards him, he's gone. So again, that's a good example of fearful attachment, which is a trauma response. Now, if we're dealing with human beings, again, how can you expect to choose a partner wisely if you deep down inside are scared to death of real intimacy? It's probably not going to happen. And if you're the partner of a person who is scared of true intimacy, it's going to be very hurtful for that partner as well. So again, we really have to look into resolving our childhood traumas. That, I believe, is the most important thing that we need to do right at the beginning before we put ourselves out on the market to get into a long-term relationship. I hope this show was valuable for you today. My name is Joe Peroni. This is the Rise Above Project. Please subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you.